Hey, my friends, it's Rich Lewis. I hope you're doing well today. So, today is our video number 7 and the latest installment in my Did You Know teaching series. And we will be covering in this video a brief history of the English word hell, basically from mythology to theology. So, I hope it blesses you today. All right, let's jump into things. Did you know that the history of the English word hell actually has its roots in Norse mythology? I found that fascinating the more I dug into it. So Norse mythology, think of names like Odin and Thor and Loki. I mean, I know it sounds like a Marvel movie, okay? But these are within the Norse mythological religion. And so it's kind of similar to how the Greeks looked at their mythology. So just like the Greeks, they had this place, this underworld called Hades, and they had a god by the same name who ruled Hades. The Norse mythology also had something very similar to that. You had the underworld known as Hell, and it was ruled by a god, or some would say a goddess, called Hel. And so that's an interesting similarity right there. Now, granted, that's a very broad brushstrokes kind of description. Okay, it actually goes much deeper in their mythology, but I'm not going to go into that today. So you have this connected to what's called the Anglo-Saxon culture, or the Germanic tribes and their culture. They all connected within that Germanic roots, and they went up to Scandinavia. But it also has a further depth in its history connected to the Latin world. So we'll get into that a little bit right here. So the question is, okay, well, how did the English word hell make it into our English translations? All right, so the first time that we know of, and that I've been able to find in my research, actually happened in the 8th century when there was this beautiful work called the Vespasian Psalter that was created. So it was this ornate, beautiful, decorative translation of the book of Psalms. And it was just the book of Psalms. That's why they call it the Psalter. And so that was the first time that you see the English word hell coming up in an English translation of Scripture. And it was translating the Latin word infernus, or also referred to as infernum sometimes. It could be conjugated differently. Sometimes you may hear it referred to as inferno, okay? All saying the same thing, comes from the root word infernum. So 8th century Vespasian Psalter. Then you have in the 14th century, several hundred years later, you have two major works that are created. One is a fictional account, Dante's Inferno. Okay, actually, it's one of 3 parts of his original work called Dante's Divine Comedy. 3 parts: Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. But Inferno, that's actually, if you trace back a lot of our imagery that we have for hell, it comes from his work Inferno. This was his way of trying to describe what he thought hell would look like. But it's a fictional account. Also in that same century, in the 14th century, you have the first full English translation that's created by John Wycliffe. Sometimes you refer to it as the Wycliffe Bible. And then fast forward a couple of hundred years later to the 17th century, you have in the year 1611, you have the King James version of the Bible that's translated. So that's kind of the history of how these translations came about. But what were they translating from? The source material was directly from what's called the Latin Vulgate. In the 4th century, you have the church father St. Jerome, who pulls together this amazing monumental accomplishment where he takes all of all the manuscripts that are available to him at that time in the Greek, the Hebrew, and the Aramaic. He pulls them together and he creates the first full Latin translation of the Bible. That was fantastic because now more and more people can read Scripture in their native tongue at that time in Latin. And that is what our English translations are directly translated from. The word infernum was the word that he used to describe all of those other Greek and Hebrew words that I've done these videos on. He used it to describe Sheol in the Old Testament, and then the other Greek words of Hades, Gehenna, and Tartarus. He also used infernum to translate some other words too, having to do with the grave and like the abyss and that kind of thing. But he used the same word each time. Why? Why would he do that? It's a great question. I don't know why. Maybe it was because he thought that was the best word to describe all of them, or maybe he just didn't have a better word to describe all of them. But as you've seen, if you've been watching these videos, it's a lack of linguistic precision, and that's a little troubling to anyone, whether it's just your common day person that's listening to these videos, or someone like me that thinks it's fun to dig into this kind of stuff, or people that are way smarter than me, like they're actual professional scholars. That's troubling because infernum, meaning hell, it doesn't describe the concepts that are in Scripture. Okay, Rich, so it sounds like what you're saying through the videos, today's video and the other ones, you're basically stripping the concept of hell. You're stripping that word hell out of Scripture. Yeah, because it's not supposed to be there. Well, what do we replace it with? I mean, where is hell at in the Bible? Are you saying it's not there? That's exactly what I'm saying. It's not there. I've proven it to you linguistically from consolidating all this research. So, well, what happens then, Rich? Well, let's put it in its place. This concept of hell, it came from mythology and has become theology. Let's do a reverse engineering here. Let's take that theology of hell and put it back where it belongs. It goes back to mythology. What do we replace it with then? Let's replace it with the original message that's in the original languages that Jesus and the other and all of our authors of Scripture are trying to say. There is something that's going to happen after we die. Some of us are going to be ready for life. Who decides that? Jesus. Okay, never think for a second I'm taking Jesus out of this equation. He is the one who decides all of this. Some of us, he's going to look at us, he's like, oh, you're ready for life. I know you well and you know me well. Yes, sir, I'm ready. If you say I'm ready for life, I'm ready for life. But there's some of us that aren't going to recognize him. There's some of them that'll be like, wait, who are you exactly? He's like, don't worry, I'm going to take time to help correct you. There's a place of correction there where he's going to be stripping away all these things that blinded you from being able to see who he is and how much he loves you. And then when he's at that point, he's going to decide, hey, I think you're ready for life. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Yes, I'm ready. And it's time to go home at that point. That's the message of Scripture when you peel back all the layers. So hopefully you have a better understanding of the history of where this word, this concept came from, and why this word was chosen. And I'll let you make a decision for yourself if I made a good argument to help you to better understand it. And we'll keep making more of these videos. And once again, I hope you have a blessed day. Until the last heart is won, I'll talk to you again next time. Bye-bye.